There is a contradiction that should not exist. In the sands of Egypt, where kings ruled for millennia, a whisper persists in the DNA of mummies. Some of these rulers, pharaohs of the New Kingdom and Old, carry genetic traces that don't match the story we tell ourselves. They are neither wholly African nor entirely what we imagine as European. And yet, when scientists peer into the ancient genomes, fragments emerge, unexpected patterns, threads of ancestry stretching across continents, across time. This is a truth that refuses to be simple. For centuries, we have imagined Egypt as a singular civilization, born from the Nile, its culture flowering in isolation, shaped solely by the African continent. The pyramids, the temples, the tombs, all symbols of a society thought to be homogeneous, contained. History textbooks, museums, documentaries, they all paint a version of Egypt where its rulers are of one people, one ancestry, a civilization neatly folded into the narrative of Northeast Africa. But the deeper you look, the more the story resists neatness. It starts with the royal mummies, Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, Ramesses III. Scientists examining their remains have traced lines of descent, paternal haplogroups, mitochondrial sequences. Some lineages suggest links to the Levant, to Anatolia, regions east of the Nile, where trade, conquest, and migration crisscrossed centuries. One line, R1b, is today most common in Western Europe. But in these ancient contexts, it isn't a sign of Celts marching into Thebes. Not exactly. The genetic signals are older, subtler. They point to shared ancestry, ancient movements of peoples, echoes of migrations that predate Europe's Iron Age. The surface explanation is tidy. Egypt's proximity to the Fertile Crescent, the movement of goods and ideas, the occasional intermarriage with foreign elites, these could explain the anomalies. On paper, it works. Trade, diplomacy, war, and migration all leave footprints. And yet, the anomalies persist, deeper than simple foreign contact. The mummies themselves, when compared to modern Egyptians, appear different. Their genomes cluster closer to ancient Near Eastern populations, showing a mix of North African and West Asian ancestry, with hints of Eurasian DNA that modern populations no longer display. The picture is incomplete. There is a pattern here that ordinary history cannot fully explain. And then comes the question no one wants to ask aloud. If Egypt was so stable, so rooted in the Nile Valley, why do its kings carry these threads of ancestry from places far beyond its deserts? It is not a question of European pharaohs or sensational claims on television. It is a puzzle of continuity and migration, of geography and biology. Each discovery peels back a layer of certainty, revealing a civilization whose identity was never as simple as we imagined. Imagine standing before the mummies, staring at the faces preserved for thousands of years. In those eyes, under that gilded mask, is a hint of the vast, interconnected world they belong to. And yet, the story is incomplete. This is where the mystery begins. This is where the known explanation falters. We have names, we have tombs, we have hieroglyphs, but the DNA whispers another truth. One that will challenge everything we thought we understood about the pharaohs and the world they inherited. The mystery deepens when we move beyond surface assumptions. Modern Egyptians, living along the same Nile Valley their ancestors did, carry slightly different genomes. Sub-Saharan ancestry is higher, layered in over centuries of trade, conquest, and migration. Yet the mummies tell a story of continuity, a baseline of North African and Levantine ancestry that persists across millennia. It is a subtle thread, almost imperceptible, but it reshapes the way we see ancient Egypt. The pharaohs were not invaders from Europe. They were not isolated African rulers untouched by the outside world. They were a hybrid population, a nexus of continents, a civilization shaped at the crossroads of Africa and Asia. The deeper mystery lies in what this hybridization reveals. Look at Ramesses III. His Y-DNA haplogroup is E1b1a, or a branch common in West and Central Africa today. Yet this lineage is part of a broader African family with deep roots in Northeast Africa. It is a lineage of continuity, not displacement. Then consider the Amarna royals, Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, Amenhotep III, where some paternal lines suggest R1b. Western Europe today is filled with this marker. Yet in antiquity, it was present across West Asia and North Africa long before Celtic migrations. These are not European pharaohs in any straightforward sense. They are the product of complex ancestral networks that crisscross the ancient world. Science begins to illuminate the contours of this puzzle. In 2017, researchers sequenced mummies from Abu Sir el-Melek, spanning centuries of Egyptian history. The results were striking. Ancient Egyptians clustered closer to ancient Levantine populations than to modern Egyptians. They had minor sub-Saharan components, but their genomes were overwhelmingly North African and West Asian. Later, a 2025 Nature study sequenced the genome of an Old Kingdom individual, over 4,500 years old. 80% North African ancestry, 20% from the Fertile Crescent. Nothing in the data pointed to mass European influx. This is the first crack in the sensationalist narrative. Genetics doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the story we were sold either. And yet, it is not a simple picture of stability. The data reveals shifts over time. Levantine input increases in certain periods, hinting at trade, migration, conquest. The genes trace flows of people, not armies of European conquerors. Even uniparental markers, Y-DNA or mitochondrial DNA, show a mosaic. U5 appears in some 11th dynasty mummies, R1b in the Amarna line, E1b1b across northern elites. Each marker tells a fragment of a larger narrative, but none alone explains the civilization. What emerges is a question that challenges expectations. How does a population remain so distinct, yet so intertwined? How do pharaohs carry hints of Europe, Levant, and Africa without ever being European? The answer is not conquest or replacement. It is continuity with permeability, stability with movement. And this is where history, genetics, and archaeology begin to collide. A civilization we thought we understood is revealed to be more dynamic, more fluid, and more interconnected than the textbooks suggest. The competing theories begin to take shape, each plausible, yet incomplete. One suggests that the European markers in Pharaohs' DNA came from foreign queens or mercenaries, isolated introductions of outside blood into the royal line. It is tidy. It fits with known history. The Hyksos, the Sea Peoples, Greek and Roman elites intermarrying with native families. But it does not explain why these signals appear repeatedly across centuries, in multiple dynasties. A single queen or soldier cannot leave a consistent imprint on the DNA of the entire elite. Something deeper is at work. Another theory leans on migration and trade. Egypt was a hub at the crossroads of continents. Its Nile Valley, a highway for people moving north, south, east, and west. Perhaps these Eurasian signals reflect small, but persistent streams of ancestry flowing in from Anatolia, the Levant, even across the Mediterranean. This theory captures the long-term connectivity, the constant motion of genes, goods, and ideas. Yet, it too falls short. The ratios of North African to Levantine ancestry remain remarkably stable over thousands of years, suggesting that the pharaoh's lineage was anchored in local populations, not dominated by outsiders. A third, more sensational interpretation circulates online, fueled by incomplete data and the allure of mystery, that the pharaohs were secretly European, or at least white in some ancestral sense. TV shows and DNA kits have hyped this claim, highlighting R1b and other markers without context. But this explanation collapses under scientific scrutiny. Y chromosome haplogroups, isolated from the rest of the genome, represent a single ancestral line, one branch in a forest of thousands. They do not define ethnicity, appearance, or cultural identity. The data simply cannot sustain a narrative of European kings conquering Egypt. Then comes the breakthrough. In labs at multiple universities, scientists apply high-coverage sequencing to mummies previously dismissed as degraded or contaminated. They reconstruct whole genomes, not just fragments. For the first time, autosomal DNA, the complete tapestry of ancestry, becomes clear. The results are consistent and revealing. Ancient Egyptian elites, like their broader society, are overwhelmingly North African, with measurable Levantine input and small Eurasian traces. Sub-Saharan ancestry exists but at low levels, far below modern proportions. The pattern is neither random nor sensational. It is deliberate, geographic, and historical. The twist arrives in the details. Ramesses III and his son carry E1b1a, a lineage that echoes across Africa, while Tutankhamun's line shows R1b. Yet the autosomal data contradicts any notion of foreign replacement. The pharaohs were indigenous to Egypt, their ancestry reflecting millennia of interactions along the Nile and with neighboring regions. They were North African kings, but their genes tell of a world in motion, a civilization absorbing influences without losing its identity. The DNA does not lie, but it does complicate the narrative we have constructed for centuries. The deeper twist is subtle, almost invisible unless you look closely. Autosomal DNA shows a civilization that is both continuous and permeable. Pharaohs were not suddenly replaced, yet they carry signals from distant lands. Not invasions, not wholesale migrations, but steady, layered contact over thousands of years. Northern Egypt has more Levantine input. Upper Egypt leans heavier toward core North African ancestry. Skin tone, facial features, even cultural practices vary across this gradient. Artifacts, tomb reliefs, and statuary reflect this spectrum. Sometimes pale, sometimes reddish-brown, but always unmistakably Egyptian. The evidence challenges our assumptions about purity and identity. It undermines the simple binaries: African versus European, native versus foreign. Genetics reveals a civilization defined not by isolation, but by its position as a bridge. The pharaohs, the ruling elite, embody this bridge in their very blood. Their ancestry is a living record of trade, diplomacy, conquest, and marriage that stretches from the deserts of Nubia to the hills of Anatolia, from the Mediterranean coast to the Fertile Crescent. Each genome is a story of connection, of influence flowing both ways, yet anchored firmly to the Nile Valley. Imagine holding a reconstructed genome in your hand. It tells you where a person's ancestors lived thousands of years ago. It is precise and scientific, yet it carries ambiguity. Tutankhamun shares markers with ancient Europeans and Levantines. Ramesses III echoes sub-Saharan lineages. Yet neither is European in any modern sense. Their identities cannot be reduced to a single haplogroup, a single migration, or a single story. Ancient Egypt was a civilization that thrived on complexity, a tapestry of ancestries woven over millennia. This is where human understanding meets humility. For decades, the sensational narratives, half-truths on television, DNA kits making bold claims, social media memes, have misrepresented what science actually tells us. The pharaohs' genes are fascinating, yes, but they do not rewrite history in the way tabloids suggest. They illuminate it, revealing subtle shifts, unexpected affinities, and long-term continuity. And yet, even in this clarity, questions remain. How did these patterns affect social structures? How did ancestry influence marriage alliances or political power? How did ordinary Egyptians relate to rulers whose lineage stretched beyond the Nile? And in the quiet of the lab, with a mummy's genome spread across a screen, there is a human moment. A scientist leans back, realizing that what they hold is not just a sequence of nucleotides. It is a bridge to people who lived, laughed, feared, and ruled thousands of years ago. They are more than names carved in stone. They are real, tangible, and yet elusive. The DNA doesn't lie, but it also doesn't provide simple answers. It complicates, enriches, and deepens our understanding of what it meant to be Egyptian, to rule the Nile, and to exist at the intersection of continents. The final insight is quiet but profound. The Pharaohs' DNA does not confirm the myths of television, nor the simplistic stories of textbooks. It tells us something subtler and more human. Egypt was never isolated. Its kings were never purely one thing or another. Their ancestry reflects millennia of connection, exchange, and adaptation. They were rulers of a civilization built on flow, of people, of ideas, of culture. Their genes are proof that identity is never static, that heritage is layered, and that power is inherited not only through blood, but through geography and history. The real mechanism behind the mystery is continuity with permeability. North African roots, Levantine links, minor Eurasian traces. They combine to form a civilization both grounded and dynamic. Pharaohs were indigenous, yet cosmopolitan. Their genetics echo the Nile's rhythm, steady, enduring, yet carrying the sediments of distant lands. It is a pattern repeated across millennia, a civilization resilient and yet responsive to the world beyond its borders. Each mummy, each genome is a testament to this interplay. Imagine standing in a tomb, staring at the golden mask of Tutankhamun. Beneath it lies DNA that speaks of Africa, of the Levant, of migration and connection. It is a whisper of the past, precise in its details, yet expansive in its implications. It challenges our assumptions about race, purity, and identity. It reminds us that the human story is never linear, never confined to a single narrative. Every pharaoh, every ruler, every individual carries echoes of movement, contact, and history. They are neither simple nor easily categorized. They are profoundly human. And so, the contradiction resolves itself not through simplification, but through understanding. The pharaohs were North African kings, their identities intertwined with their geography, their history, and the people they ruled. They were connected to the wider world, yet rooted in their own. Their DNA is not a scandal, a shock, or a sensational revelation. It is a bridge, a record of a civilization that defies easy labels, that exists in a space between continents, time periods, and expectations. The ultimate lesson lingers long after the tomb is closed. Science illuminates the past, but it does so with nuance. Ancient Egypt is neither wholly African nor European, neither isolated nor conquered. It is a civilization of connection, of continuity, of subtle complexity. And perhaps, in understanding the pharaoh's true genetic heritage, we glimpse something larger, that human identity, like history itself, is a tapestry, never fixed, always intertwined and endlessly fascinating. The DNA doesn't lie, but what it tells us is richer, stranger, and more beautiful than any story we thought we knew.